All right, welcome everybody. Everybody's watching this on playback. So whenever you're watching this, wherever you are in the world, welcome to our monthly webcast for our small to medium-sized business owners. So today we have Steve DeVries, and I'm going to let him introduce himself from Focal Point. Steve is a business coach and coaching businesses in a lot of similar areas and industries to our business, which is one of the things that I loved when I met you, is that I was like, oh, all of our clients need to have a conversation with Steve. And I'll let you get into the nitty gritty of, what that is and what you do. But do you want to start by just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about Focal Point and what you offer for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Christine. Thanks for having me on. Again, my name is Steve DeVries, and I am a Focal Point business and executive coach. So, what does a business coach do, or what does an executive coach do? So, we help our clients get what they want from their business or from their team. So, I'm based in Southern New Hampshire, but I work all around New England and actually around the world. I have a couple of clients in the UK at the moment. And so, what we do effectively is support our clients' needs when it comes to things like time management, team management, profitability, strategy. All of those things are part of operating a business. Sometimes we get really focused on the individual, and that's when executive coaching comes in. And
Hmm.
so we would do a lot of leadership and management coaching and training. Because let's face it, there's a lot of people out there who own businesses, operate high-level teams. They're really good at the product or service that they offer, but they haven't necessarily had that classic business training or experience yet. And so people like myself can help shorten that learning curve and ultimately help those businesses or those leaders move forward in their career and get exactly what it is that they're trying to get out of that company.
That's awesome. And I know you and I have talked about this, but both of us tend to focus on businesses that tend to be a little bit more physical product or inventory heavy. And it's not always the case, but as you mentioned, a lot of the times these business owners, they know their product, they know like what their offering is really, really well, but there might not always be traditional business training there. And can become so overwhelming when all of a sudden you're managing a team of 10 people that you're responsible for, and you're supposed to be understanding like your tax filings and your licenses and payroll, and you're supposed to be HR, you're supposed to be operations, you're
Yeah.
supposed to be marketing. Um, and that's when I really feel like you're exactly right. They need someone that's going to kind of like help them to build themselves into like that CEO, as well as systematically how you get the business to where it needs to go. So there's so many different types of coaches out there. And you
Mhm.
mentioned that you do business coaching and executive coaching, gave us a little bit of the differences. But let's dive a little bit deeper into that because there's career coaches, there's life coaches. Like I can hire a coach for whatever I want. So tell me a little bit more about like reasons why I would come to you, like specifics. What do I look for in my business that tells me I need to call Steve for business coaching or executive coaching?
Yeah, so great question. And let's start with what business or executive coaching is not, right? So you mentioned life coaches. So life coaches are typically people, they're professionals who are going to help you in the personal side of things, or maybe the
Mm,
spiritual side of things. If you're not involved in a church, a life coach can help you with those types of things, right? And then you've got career coaches. And that's a little bit closer to where I'm at because it's professionally focused. And there are
sure.
some business or executive coaches that may do some career coaching as well. But really, the function of a career coach is what it sounds like. So they're there to help you go through transitions from one career point to the next, or maybe help you find that next role, right? So maybe beyond a recruiter, but someone who's really specifically focused on helping you in your career journey. Now, when it comes to business and executive coaching, the differences are minor, but there are some differences. So, an executive coach really focuses on working with senior level people in a business, specifically on their leadership capabilities.
Mm.
And so, for any of you out there who have ever worked for a quote unquote bad boss, they probably haven't, had the opportunity to work with an executive coach. And an executive coach is going to help you really break down things like understanding your communication style and
Mm,
understanding the communication styles of the people on your team and how to better connect with them. Perhaps how to strategize for your specific role, right? Again, not career coaching, but you're getting coaching specific to that role that you're in. So if you're a CEO or a vice president, or maybe you're at, one step down, you're like a mid-level manager or director level, trying to break through to that next level. An executive coach is going to really help you focus and develop your skills relative to that specific role. So,
got
as
it.
an example, one of my clients started out as an executive coach, and we've now transitioned into business coaching. But when we first got engaged, the challenge for that person was they're a second generation leader in their business or second generation owner. So the
Mm,
parents had started the company, and everybody knew the parents and recognized the parents as the leaders of the business. Now, as they moved into retirement and my client took over, my client understood the industry really well, and he
yeah.
understands the products really well, and he's got this whole vision about where he wanted the business to go. But here was the problem: nobody recognized him really as a strong leader, and he didn't have
Mm,
that presence where he could stand up in front of the entire company and say, not in so many words, but I'm your leader. This is the strategy that we're going to follow in this business. This is the direction that we're going to go. And here's what everybody needs to understand about their roles in order to make it happen. Right?
yeah.
That was as foreign to this individual as you could imagine. And for, a 70 or 80 person business, that's a really big deficit to have if you want to lead that company to the next level in which he's doing now.
Yep.
But a funny thing happens along that journey. So you get that person up to speed in terms of what it means to be an executive, and now you transition more into the business coaching side of things, and that's where you really start focusing less on the individual and more on the things that are happening in the business from one department to the next, right? So you've got strategy that you're putting together. You've got people management challenges that you're dealing with. Maybe you're getting into the finances, right? So a lot of executive coaches or business coaches that have any kind of experience in working with financial professionals or with CFOs or controllers in a business, we're going to have that high level understanding of how to manage a business from a financial perspective as well. We're not here to replace CFOs. We're not here to replace people like yourself, but we can certainly help our clients from a strategy perspective bring all of that together. So
Yes.
again, one's focused on all the entire business and the other one's focused on more of the individual's development.
Now, if I were, because I sort of find this a lot in small business, and not every business is there, but I think that as small businesses grow, especially when they're closely held, and it's not always smoothly, succession planning isn't always just going to our kids, unfortunately, things like that. But if
Right.
I have like kind of a key manager that I'm looking for this person to become more of a leader role over time because maybe I don't want to work 80 hours in my own business forever, which is what we end up doing, right? Like we quit our 9 to 5s to start a business so that we can work 80 hours a week. Is that something that I could bring you in on and say, hey, Steve, I have this key manager. We need help to develop their leadership skills so that they can grow into that position and I can, candidly work less. Is that something that would be a good fit for executive coaching?
100%.
Okay.
So you'll find a lot of business or executive coaches that are involved in, we call it exit planning, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, it's the senior leader that you just described that's in the process of exit planning, whether that means selling the business or maintaining ownership and just passing on leadership to
Yeah.
somebody else, passing it on to the next generation. Any of those things exists, and usually what you'll find is that next generation leader wants to get out from underneath some of the old ways of doing things,
Mm-hmm.
but they have trouble navigating that because I'm not going to call it a power struggle, but there is a struggle, especially from people in the organization who might be really loyal to the
Yes.
outgoing parent, or senior leader, and they aren't yet loyal to the new up and comer. And that's a big challenge. You've got to figure out how to be your own leader and carve your own path out when it comes to gaining the loyalty of the people in your business. And that takes a lot of hard work. It doesn't come just
Yeah.
because you have the title. And so, yes, that's absolutely one of the things that I do.
That's awesome. And I've seen this happen on more than one occasion, even just not even in like an exit planning strategy, so much as like small business owners can self-implode. Like I've unfortunately see businesses that they just start to fail from a number of different perspectives because the original founder or founders get burnt out and they didn't take the time to identify and to grow and develop the next level of leadership. So the delegation didn't happen enough. And then the business grows too fast and it can't sustain that foundation. You didn't have enough people that were being developed into those roles. So I think
Yeah.
that's a really important thing for small business owners to think about, even if they're not thinking about leaving or selling. Like you want to have that deep enough bench that you have people that are always ready to, continue on the growth. So let's talk a little bit more specifics about the business coaching because I love the things that you do. You're absolutely right. They so just like fit right in with the piece that we do, which is the finance side. But truly, if a business owner doesn't understand the value of the finances or doesn't understand like how all of the pieces get to that or how to use it to make decisions, it's kind of useless, right? Like it's just
Right.
numbers on a piece of paper that I've put together. So tell me a little bit more about the business coaching and some of the ways in which you help your clients and why it's so important.
So, one of the things that you said just a minute ago about delegation,
Mm,
that's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest challenge that I find small business owners have. Because when you start out, you're all things to every part of the business, and you gave a lot of those examples earlier. And as time goes on, and how we get to end up working those 70 and 80-hour work weeks is because we haven't learned how to delegate properly. We haven't
yeah.
learned the high value things that we do versus the low value things that we do. We think we need to know everything and do everything. And so, and because it's such a delicate balance and because it's our baby, right? I mean,
Yes.
this business is us, right?
I know. I'm like raising my hand. I'm like, ooh, I feel that right now.
So many business owners identify themselves as their business,
Yes.
right? And so especially you see this especially towards the end of someone's career as they're thinking about transitioning and they struggle to let go. You realize part of the reason why they don't want to let go, it's an emotional one because they've tied their entire identity to
Hmm.
their business. And I would like to tell anybody who's listening who happens to be in a business ownership role, you are so much more than the owner of a business. It's a huge part of who you are, but you are so much more than that. And it's okay when the time comes to let that piece go because you've got all of these other great things in your life, hopefully, that you can focus on. But back to the question, delegation. I see that as such a challenge. And so I'll give you a great example. So a few years back, my wife and well, my family and I, we were on a cruise with another family. And so we're on this cruise ship and sitting with the other family. And my buddy says, "Hey, I'll be back in a couple of hours." I said, "Couple of hours? We're on a cruise ship. Where are you going?" And he says, "I've got to go do payroll." And I did a
Uh,
double take. I said, "What?" So he owns this company. He actually has a partner in the company, but he did not want to let anybody operate payroll. And so this guy brings his laptop on the cruise ship. He pays for the most expensive
Wi-Fi plan?
Wi-Fi
Those are
package.
not cheap.
So he can simply because he can do Wi-Fi. And this is not it's not a tiny business. There had to be, I think at the time, 25, 30 people in the
Oh,
business, maybe not
wow.
quite that many. It doesn't matter. Suffice to say, he has a business partner, and there's probably at least, a handful of other people that would be qualified to run payroll, but he couldn't let that go. Imagine
Mm,
that. Going on a
no.
cruise and doing
No.
payroll in your cabin in the middle of the Atlantic or something. So that's a classic example. They don't know what the high value and low value activities are. They
Yeah.
don't know how to delegate properly, and there's a nuance to it, right? When you're delegating something to a relative newbie in the
Hmm.
business, you have to almost, I'm not going to. I don't like the term micromanage because I think it's so overused and misunderstood. But you do have to have frequent check-ins when you ask
Sure.
somebody to do something as a newbie. You got to check in regularly. You can't assume that they know anything. You have to be really clear on the instructions versus if you're delegating to someone who we all know what the rock star looks like, right? They've
Yeah.
been in the industry a long time. You trust them, you know their body of work. You can simply say, "Here's what I need, and I'll see you at the finish line." Two very different strategies, but it all falls under the umbrella of delegation, and that's what those small business owners, I think, without having that experience or training,
Mm-hmm.
miss.
Yep, for sure.
So,
I've definitely seen the examples too where a business owner may only know how to delegate one way. Like you're maybe just used to delegating to the rock star, or you're maybe just used to delegating to the newbie. And if you try to crisscross those, like you're either gonna like alienate your and micromanage your I use micromanage, but you're going to
yeah,
micromanage your
yeah,
rock star right out of the business, or you're going to terrify your newbie and end up with a mess on your hands. And so you
yeah.
want to make sure that you understand the difference. So, one of the things that I think is so great about you in particular, is that you have like an operations specific background and you really understand operations and product movement and so you're not just I hate to use the word fluffy, but I know that you know that there's a lot of fluffy coaches out there too.
There
But like
are.
you really have the background and the ability to get your hands dirty to understand what operations and systems should look like. Can you tell me a little bit more about like how you use that approach with your business owners?
Well, it's the only thing I know. So after, I've been doing coaching for 4 years as a business practice, but in all reality, I've been doing it for my entire career because I'm a career general manager. So when you're a general manager of a business, you are responsible for every functional area in the
Mhm.
business. You may be lucky enough to have a functional lead in most of those areas, but you still have to know something in order to manage those people and
Yes.
those expectations effectively. So I have an operations background. For the first few years of my career, I was in purchasing and supply chain and operations management. And then I moved quickly into becoming a general manager. And that's where I stayed for my career prior to starting Focal Point. So, and most of that time was actually part of being in a publicly traded company. So now imagine you're running a business of anywhere from 10 people to 80 people, right? Which is kind of the different sizes of the businesses that I've run in my career. But you're reporting up to a publicly traded corporation. So
Yep.
now you've got to wear your boardroom hat and be able to have a conversation on more of a high level strategic perspective. And then you have to take that once you've sold it to the people, in the boardroom because they're your toughest critics. Then you've got to bring it back and make it real for the people that you work with every single day.
Yeah.
From, operators in a shop in a factory to the loading dock to your engineering team to your accounting team, sales and marketing team, your HR team, all of it. Everybody needs to understand their role
Yeah.
and they all have to understand each other's goals and how it all intertwines and ultimately gets the business where it wants to go. So from an operations perspective, I've spent a lot of time in small manufacturing facilities. Because I was part of a publicly traded company, they had resources that allowed us to bring in experts that would help us enhance a lot of our operations, and I would be side by side with them, not only informing them of what some of our needs are, but learning from them.
Yeah.
So I've had this really fortunate career journey where I can walk into any kind of shop and I can see if their inventory is under control. I can
Mm-hmm.
see if their processes are under control. I can see if people are engaged. I can see if people are cross-trained. I can see if equipment is being maintained properly or not. All of those different things are part of, I guess, what I bring to the table beyond your standard coaching lessons, right? Because there is a curriculum. Most business coaches will have learning
Yeah.
mechanisms in place, whether they're full-blown lessons or just some bullet points in a PowerPoint presentation that we rely on to sort of build a structure for these businesses. I like to meet my clients where they are. So
Mm.
if they've done really well from the operational side, I'm not going to walk through their shop more than once and say, yep, okay, you've crossed a lot of T's and dot a lot of I's here. You're looking good. Or, hey, you know what? There's a lot of low-hanging fruit here that could really optimize your business. Let's talk about some of these. And if it makes sense to them, then they go ahead and they implement things. If it doesn't make sense to them, I will probably bring in a high-level operations expert, right? A consultant, because I can't be all things to everybody. And
Sure.
so one of the things I like to tell people is when you hire a business coach, they really ought to have a strong network of people that they can bring in who are experts. It's
Yeah.
like going to the doctor. You go see your general practitioner once a year, you get a checkup, and they're qualified to treat you for a lot of different things. And that's usually, you know, fine. But when something else comes up where and they say, "Oh, I got to send you to a specialist," I'm going to do the same thing, right? I can look at financial reports, but if a client's books are a mess, right,
Yep.
and I'm not going to clean all that up. I wouldn't
Right.
know the first thing about setting up a general ledger. I know what it should look like. I know what a good P&L construction looks like, but I'm not going to do it. I'm calling you,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
If I see that your IT is really, you've got a lot of things that are putting your business at risk, I'm not going to sit there and upgrade all of your what am I looking for? Your antivirus protections and so forth. I'm going to say you need
Sure.
to talk to so on and so forth. So that's a big part of what a good business coach should be able to do is call people in to help you with your business when you've got to dive deep.
Yeah. So I just got so excited when you were talking just now, and I like when you and I first met, this was I think the piece that just I felt connected with right away, and like I could just completely trust our clients with you for all of the reasons that you just mentioned, because you had such a deep bench when it came to the operations side of things
Yeah.
that that really, and I don't think a lot of people understand the value of that. So I just want to emphasize it. Like your ability to walk into a client's place of business and look at their operation and immediately start to pick out like, that might be an inefficiency. This might be something that we want to talk about, or it looks great and we need to focus on this area instead. A lot of people can't do that. So your background is so, so valuable to your clients because you do have that ability. And, you're not just coming to the table with, let's develop your leadership skills, although that's important, but you actually fundamentally have the ability to say, this system isn't working. This system is causing inefficiency. This strategy is causing inefficiency. And to be able to work with them specifically on those things, that has so much value because now we're really getting into the nitty gritty of like what makes the business go.
Christine, I think I'm going to hire you to be like to lead my hype team or
The
something.
hype
That was
team,
great.
the
I
hype team.
appreciate it. No, but
Um,
you're absolutely right. So it's funny, so many people when they have their business, it's like you got to niche down, you got to niche down, you got to
yeah,
niche down. And so for me, because of just my experience, I don't necessarily have to niche down. I love talking about manufacturing. I love businesses that
yeah,
make things, right? Because that's the background I've been through. Those businesses are so interesting to me.
they are.
But I guess my niche is being a generalist and being able to walk through that operation and see all those things because I've had to live it, right? When you run a small manufacturing company, or any kind of operationally driven
Yep.
business, you've got to know what that stuff looks like, and you've got to at least know the right questions to ask.
Yes, 100%. Which leads me to my next question is more so like when do clients know when they need to come to you? So like what are some things that they're maybe starting to feel like aren't working, pain points that they're starting to feel in their business that they should be like understanding, oh, this is the point that I need to call Steve. Like maybe they don't understand fundamentally what the underlying cause or the problem is yet, but they know that something is kind of like just not working as well as it could.
Well, so if you're going home generally frustrated most days, that's that's a starting point.
That's a great one.
Right. And what is the root cause of the frustration? Well, that's what we dig into
Yeah.
at the very beginning. Some clients or some prospects come to me and they're very clear on what their challenges are. And some of them it's just like, why does this not feel better? Why am I not
Yeah.
making more money? Why am I struggling to connect with people? Why is it a turnstile of employees, coming in and out of here. I
Yeah.
thought it would be great to run my own business, and now I hate it, and I can't wait to not be the leader of my own business, right? So I always tell people it's issues of time, team, money, and strategy.
Okay.
So if you are working way longer hours, day in and day out, week in and week out, that's a pain point that we help with, right?
Okay.
Oftentimes it's around delegation.
Yep.
If you are struggling to get your team to do what you need them to do, maybe that's a
Mm.
delegation issue, maybe it's a clarity issue, maybe you haven't set up. I have a new client that never wrote a job description. They have
I was going to
almost
say,
20.
how often do you see missing SOPs from?
Oh, all the time,
Yeah.
all the time, right? So, and it's just it's in their mind, it's clear, but they haven't
Right.
made it clear to their team, right? So they don't understand how to communicate, right? Everybody, if you haven't had any training on this, we all tend to operate under the golden rule, right? The golden rule is treat everyone as you want to be treated, right? Communicate with everyone as you'd like to be communicated with. That's not what works in business. It's actually something
No,
that we call the platinum rule, right? Treat everybody or communicate with everybody the way they want to be
they
treated,
want to. Yep.
right? And so a lot of business leaders don't get that. They haven't
Mm.
had that kind of training. And so if you hear them griping about, man, my people, my team, nobody seems to get it. Well, the problem may not be the team. It might be your hiring practices, or it
Yeah.
might be you in general.
Yep.
Profitability. A lot of businesses, they get started, small businesses especially, they don't know what they should be driving for profitability. They don't know what a healthy P&L for their business and their industry of their size should look like, right?
Yes.
We fix that. We help educate people on that. I had a client that did it was a small professional services firm, 5 or 6 people in the business, so small, and they had no idea the power of using a P&L, right, at a
Oh,
high level. And
that
the
hurts my
office
heart.
manager, I know, and the office manager, had an accounting background, and so they would put everything together, but the owner wasn't really using it. He's very
Yeah.
much a gut feel kind of individual, and that served him well in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways it didn't. And so we spent a lot of time working through that, right? What does a clean P&L look like? What should it look? What's your goal for
Yeah.
net operating profit? Things of that nature. Like, did I play a CFO role there at a very, very high level, just scratching the surface kind of perspective? But that was all he needed in a business that size for the
Yeah.
time, right? So now he's controlling his business and he understands what a business under control looks like through the financials, right?
Yes.
How many people start a business and they have no idea how long they're going to be in it? They have no idea
Yep.
how big they want it to get. There's literally zero strategy involved.
Yep. That gut
Oh,
feeling thing gets you a little ways, and I feel like we see that a lot with
yeah.
businesses that we come on board with early, right? Like we've sort of walked them up from the startup phase. There is a certain point where the gut feeling thing will take you through, and then there's a certain point where the gut feeling is going to completely plateau you if you
Yeah.
don't learn how to look at metrics and develop KPIs and understand your business in more detail.
100%. KPIs, that's another one. They have no idea how to measure the performance in their business, what's important, what's not important. And so we work on those things as well. Sometimes they're operational, sometimes they're financial. Hopefully we get to both. Um,
So do you help them identify what KPIs are important to them? Because that is an area that I think that people are really intimidated by.
yeah.
Key performance indicators, by the way, in case anyone has not heard the abbreviation, I tend to speak in accountant
Yeah,
ad
yeah, yeah.
libs. So key performance indicators, I think a lot of business owners are intimidated by this because they don't even know what key performance indicator they're supposed to look at.
Yeah, so we definitely work through that as
Okay.
well, right? And so usually there's something around, if they're responsible for selling in their business, everybody is at some point in time.
Yeah.
You've got to understand how many leads you need because of you need 100 leads a year in order to get through a 50% conversion rate, and so,
Yep.
so on and so forth, right? I'm oversimplifying it, but they don't understand that. They don't understand how many sales calls they need to have. So if you
Yeah.
you know if you need 500 sales calls to have 100 proposals to close half of those and get 50, get to that number. Nobody thinks about it in those terms. They don't break it down that way. From an operations perspective, it might be, how many units do you need to ship per day, or how many things do you have to have come off the line per hour in order to reach your financial goals. Everyone will be like, "Oh, I want $10 million in sales next year." Okay,
Great.
fine. What's your average sale size, right? And okay, so we need X number of sales, and you just keep breaking it down from there, and then pretty soon you realize, man, I'm way overshooting, or maybe I'm way undershooting, or maybe I
Right.
need to add a piece of equipment, maybe I
I
need
was
to
going to
make
say,
a
maybe I don't
hire.
even have the capacity to hit that number. And then how do we deal with that?
Right. So there's all of those measurements in the business that help you understand whether or not you are even on plan or not. And a lot of people will set a plan at the beginning of the year and
Mm-hmm.
not think about it until the end of the
Yes.
year. We don't do that. We're doing quarterly reviews, right?
Perfect.
We're resetting things along the way so that, and this is what I learned as being part of a publicly traded company, right? You set your annual plan and then you're revisiting it every quarter, and you're making adjustments based on market conditions, based on your own business's conditions, whatever the case may be, so that whether or not you need to provide guidance to Wall Street or not, you've got to provide guidance to somebody, and that's you as
Yep.
the business owner. So let's make really good decisions by, making small adjustments along the way rather than a big swing.
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right about that. And like, I've been guilty of all of these things. I mean, we've been in business for 9 years now this month. And like, I'm sort of laughing because I remember like that version of myself at the beginning where like the goals were a little loose and a lot of
Yeah,
it was based off of gut feeling. And at some point, it really slows you down to not do that breaking down process. And like you said, it's like our New Year's resolutions. It's like, everything was a great idea on January 1st. But
yeah,
if we get to March and we're not actively pursuing, those goals anymore, then you're not going to end up where you wanted to be on December 31st. So that is such a key point to try to break down like what are we tracking? Why are we tracking it? When are we tracking it? How do we know if we're on track or if we're off track and how do we adjust?
100%, 100%. So, and it can be, you can do that for any kind of business, whether you're a business that makes something, or whether you are a professional services firm, or whether you're a B2C business,
Yeah.
meaning you're selling to consumers like you and me walking in off the street or buying something off of a website. All of those things are all applicable to running a well-oiled business. And so I would encourage anybody out there, think about your business not just on an annual basis, but
Mm,
think about it in 90-day increments, right? My own coaching mentor, Grant Fisher, talked to me about this early on when I got started. He said, "Listen, a lot of coaching clients really get intimidated by thinking about things in yearly buckets." And
yeah.
so and this is such great advice, and so I do this now. Think about breaking your business's needs down in 90-day increments, right? That doesn't seem too intimidating.
Nope.
It should lead towards the things that you focus on should be leading you towards where you want to be at the end of the year. But if you break it down in smaller bite-sized pieces and look at your business through quarterly increments, you're going to be so much more likely to accomplish what you set out to do. So, and it keeps you focused, right? Because a lot of
Yes.
noise. How much noise, crept in early in your business?
I
Right?
mean, so much of it, and I think a lot of it you don't realize that that's what it is. Is all that just yeah, and it takes you a lot of experience, I think, to be able to sift through some of that.
Yeah.
And also like you said it a minute ago too, there's just like you said it when you were talking about like if I have to make 500, sales calls in order to get 100 proposals. The first time that I did that breakdown, I was like totally overwhelmed. Like where, I don't remember what the number was, but it was just like, how am I ever going to get through this many connections and conversations to get this many proposals theoretically to close this many to get to where I want to go? So sometimes like that overarching number or goal or bar that we're setting, like our brain just we can't stay focused on that 500 sales. It's got to be like, okay, well, let's break that down. That's 10 a week. that's two a day. And now it's like, okay, two a day. That seems like a little bit more like something that isn't just going to make me throw everything up in the air and go, I'm never getting to 500, right?
You're 100% right. And so if for anybody, listening to this, if you've heard the term SMART goals, right?
Mm,
It's an acronym. Your goals need to be specific, measurable. The A part, I've heard different versions, but I like thinking about A as it's aligned with your values in your
I like that.
business, realistic and time bound. And those last two are the ones that I think most business leaders lose sight of. It has
Mm,
to be realistic, right? So the example that you just gave, two per day, doesn't seem so bad, right? But what if it were 10 per day and you're like, I can't do 10 per day?
right.
And the whole reason you got to that point is because you wanted to grow to a certain level. Well, if it's not realistic, then you're just setting yourself up for failure. So
Yes.
that's when you sort of reset your expectations and work it back to something that is realistic. And of course, the time bound side, how many times have we said, you know, uh, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. Okay, by when? Oh, I don't know. I'm just going to lose 20 pounds. Well, no, you're not. If you
No,
don't
you're
set yourself a
not. Yeah.
goal, right? And it's the same thing in business. If you don't put expectations, if you don't put goals, any kind of plan with that time-bound element to it, you're probably not going to succeed. You might get there someday, but not nearly as fast as you want.
Not nearly as fast as you want. Yes, that is definitely the key piece. So, if you had to leave your clients or your potential clients with just one piece of advice, I'm gonna put you on the hot
Ooh.
seat. Like if you could just say like one thing to small business owners, what would be like your key thing for that you would want them to be thinking about?
I think it's that you don't have to do it all on your own.
Mm,
There's
hmm.
so much of that out there, right? You start it and you think you have to be an expert at everything. And take it from someone who isn't an expert at everything. I literally am a generalist. You really should know something about every core function in your business, but you don't need to be an expert. And that's, I think, one that really stalls the growth of businesses and business leaders. Acknowledge that you don't have to be an expert at every functional area of the business. And when necessary, get the help that you need. There's so many fractional services out there
Hmm.
who are experts. You don't have to build out an entire accounting team, for
Yes.
example, and
Yep.
you don't have to be an expert at accounting to run a successful business. You just need a share of a person's time in order that who is an expert in order to get what you need for that business. Same with HR, and that's one that's really deficient in a lot of businesses as well.
Yeah.
Same with IT. You don't need all of these departments in a small business. Just get the support that you need so that you are getting best practices at a rate that your business can afford.
Yep. Such good advice, which actually brings me to another question that I didn't ask you. If you identify one of these, I don't like to use the word weaknesses, but like if you identify one of these areas that could be more supported, and I'm going to be your hype girl for another second and tell you that you're incredibly well connected. I know this after talking to you for quite a while. So, you're not just, saying, hey, I'll help you find an expert. Like you're someone that I can rely on to know like who do I call if I need something. Do you kind of help your clients identify who might be the right person to trust or who might be whether they're hiring internally or whether or not it's fractionally, but you've identified this area that needs more support. Do you kind of help
Right.
them through that process of like what becomes the right fit for you?
Absolutely. I did it
Nice.
today with a client. And you're right, and that's it brings a bigger point to business coaching. When if you decide you want a business coach or an executive coach, that individual should bring with them a really strong network of
Mm-hmm.
vetted professionals because you're probably going to need someone at some point in time,
Yep.
right? So if you're thinking about it, ask that business coach or that prospective coach for you, how do they network?
Yep.
Right? If they don't give you a strong answer about, well, I'm part of this organization, I'm part of this organization, I attend these meetings, I do this, I do that. If they're not giving you that, then they probably have a weak professional network and they're not
Yeah.
going to be in good position. they should also not necessarily know something about your business because I'm not here to make you a better widget maker, right?
Right.
Or, I'm not here to tell you how to be, a better provider of the services that you provide. I'm here to help you run a better organization and be a better leader. So don't worry so much about hiring somebody that comes from your industry, right? What you really want is someone who can take the blinders off and
Mm,
give you a fresh perspective. And so maybe on another conversation, I could share a story with you about how I did that earlier in my career and one of my career stops along the way. But I think I think it's all about having that strong network. And when you're interviewing people, you've got to ask about that. And I will do that all the time. And I've done it for all those functional areas of the business. And listen, not every service provider is going to be a good match for every
right.
client, right?
Yep.
I'm the first person to tell my prospects, listen, if you're interested in coaching, but you feel like I'm not the right fit for you, right? If you feel like you can't connect with me for some reason, you're not going to want to talk to me every week or every other week. The
Right.
whole thing's going to fall apart. It's not worth your time or your money. Let me help you find a different coach that might resonate better with you. And I'll do that with my, service providers as well. I might know several people who do fractional, accounting services, right?
Yep.
Managed accounting services or managed IT services, what have you. But it comes down to making an introduction where you feel like someone is going to be a good fit, not just from an X's and O's standpoint, but that
Right.
interpersonal standpoint.
100%. It just makes the relationship more likely to be successful. And like from our side of things too, like I don't want to work with someone who doesn't enjoy working with me, like
Right.
it doesn't make it a nice symbiotic relationship, which is what we're looking for on our side too. So I 100% agree with you. We take the same approach when we're recommending professionals is like, listen, we need to try to find somebody that you're really going to vibe with because otherwise you're not going to call them. You're not going to call them. You're not going to take their advice. This just isn't going to be beneficial. So I know we're kind of wrapping up on time, but you mentioned a couple of things just now. What are some other questions that you recommend that people ask when they're interviewing a business coach? Like, what do they need to be asking when they're looking to hire someone to make sure that somebody is the right fit?
So I think it's important, like I said, it's not about necessarily the exact industry, but experience in that business model
Mm,
makes sense. So
yep.
I'll give you an example. So um, I tend not to work with law firms or medical practices because not only do I have zero experience in those types of industries, which is fine enough, but I also, they have a different business model than anything I've been a part of.
Yeah.
I have been part of manufacturing companies. I've been part of, I ran a forklift dealership, which was a completely different business model from manufacturing, right? You're selling capital equipment in the hopes that you can hang parts on those forklifts, right? You can sell service and parts and maybe rentals.
Yep.
But that's a different business model than manufacturing. Um, Service providers, right? One kind of service provider kind of bleeds into another to some degree anyway. So
Sure.
at least make sure that coach has some ideas on what it is that your business model looks like because a lot of stuff transitions back and forth. So I would say that is definitely something you'd want to think about. Um, Ask them what their experience is. Ask them what not just about their professional network, but the people that they've worked with in the past. One
Mm,
thing you're going to find is most coaches come from a long professional background that wasn't coaching,
yeah.
right? Ask them about that. Ask them about their experience. Ask them about the people that they've worked with. Would the people that you've worked with in the past want to work with you again? And
That's a
why?
great interview question.
Right. And so I'm proud that I'm still in touch with people and friends with people that I worked with in my very first job when I graduated
Oh,
college.
I love that.
And it speaks to that coach's ability to build relationships and help you build relationships. Because in the end, that's what business is. Businesses only go as far as the people who are in that company want it to go.
Yep.
And so if you hire a coach that can't give you firm examples of how they've done that and who they've done it with and do they still have relationships with some of those people, then how effective are they going to be at helping you? So
Mm.
I would think about asking something along those lines as well.
Awesome. Well, Steve, this has been so wonderful. I always love chatting with you. Every time we talk, I feel like we could talk shop for hours.
We probably
Because
could.
yeah, all the things that you say, I'm like, yes, I just want to like bottle you up and like send you in a little jar to all of my clients.
Nice.
Um, but you also do a lot of like training, speaking, like content development. Where can
Mhm.
people find you? And like, I'll put your contact information up, but I know that you also do a lot of training. Like, how can people find you if they want more of you, other than just reaching out to you directly? What's the best way to get more of Steve?
More Steve. So I'm going to make that a website, moresteve.com. Um, so right now, so I do some public speaking here and there, but mostly where you'll find me is I have a my own podcast. It's called Made in New England. It's all
Perfect.
about yeah. So if you can find it on YouTube, right? I post it up on YouTube. It's a video one just like this. So Made in New England. It's all about businesses here in New England that make things and the people who lead them.
I love
Um,
that.
I'm all over. Thank you. I'm all over LinkedIn. I will share thoughts and ideas on LinkedIn. That's where you get me mostly. I will do workshops sometimes for like I did some stuff for the New Hampshire Manufacturing Extension Partnership. I've done some free workshops or webinars there. Um, if people out there listening are interested in having me come in and speak at a chamber event or anything along those lines, I'm happy to do all that stuff. I love being in front of an audience. So thank you for asking the question.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it. We're going to get this up on YouTube for everybody to watch, and we'll include your contact information so that hopefully they will reach out to you, because I know from experience that a lot of small business owners, myself included, like we just need that outside perspective. And I just think that you bring so much experience, valuable experience to the table. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it. Great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.